Welcome to the 5th episode of Talking Time Podcast.
Are you meaning to say we've done 5 of these? It feels like only yesterday we were doing the first one.
I know. It's been going very well.
Yeah, well, I'm doing great. I am recording from my new funky studio, which no one's going to be able to see because it's an audio podcast. But anybody that has followed me on my other channel, which is Scottish Watches, you'll have seen hopefully the podcast, not just in audible format, but in the visual realms as well. So that's where I'm recording from. If the audio is slightly different than you're maybe used to before, that is the reason. But fingers crossed, there will be no audio or visual gremlins. Everything will go tickety-boo. But before we introduce our special guest for this episode, I believe you come bearing news.
I am bearing. We've got something very exciting coming up. And actually, our guest is taking part as well. We've just announced our first live event, which is going to be big in London. In Westminster. It's an event just for British brands, our trade members. We've got 81 now, so lots of brands to see. It's happening on Saturday, 9th of March, 2024, and it's called British Watchmakers Day. We've got 30 exhibitors confirmed already, a lot more to come. They will all be announced in due course. We've got Roger W. Smith exhibiting for the first time ever. But what's the most exciting thing about it is brands will be creating limited edition watches just for the day. And to start that trend, Roger W. Smith is creating a Series 1 watch. Great news. I'm really excited about that. And we've got about 18 brands have already confirmed that they will be doing limited editions. So you actually have to come to our event to be able to buy a watch on a first come, first serve basis. I've seen a few watches. It's really exciting. Can't reveal anything, but we'll talk about it on our Instagram or website.
So I know the number you gave us there was 30 out of the 81, but I know that you've only managed to speak to about 30 so far because everybody's so keen to speak to you. It's taking hours and hours for each of these brands, and you're just there yourself doing this. So I expect more. I expect probably about 80 of the 81 brands to be there.
Well, it's been summer, I think. Yeah, there'll be lots of brands there. We expect to have most British brands that have ever been at any event, and we're really, really excited about it.
Fantastic. Well, that is a date to put in your diary. Details will obviously be on the website, on Instagram. We'll shout about it on the Scottish Watches podcast because we're going to be doing some collabs, it turns out. Yeah, more on that later on. But I think it's probably time that you introduced our special guest because he's been sitting there patiently and quietly for the last few minutes.
I know. Today we've got Piers Berry from Pinion Watches. Hi Piers, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
You've been on Scottish Watches before, haven't you? Which I've listened to, and it was a great episode.
Yeah.
When was that?
That was, I think that was June 21, I think, from memory.
It was around about the time that your watch appeared, or watches appeared in the Fast and Furious, whatever 9 it must have been, because 10 has just come out.
Yeah, it's weird because they made that 10 movie so quickly. And I think on the number 9, I remember it was like, obviously before the pandemic, I think they're making that in sort of 2018 or something. So it took them ages. And then it's almost as if they made 2 films in one go and just decided to shelve one and release it later.
I believe that is kind of what they get up to. They've got a good thing going, and the pandemic must have put a real spanner in the works with recording. So they just kept on sort of behind the scenes building on the next one as soon as the last one was done. But enough about movies, we'll get into that later on because I know your potted history with television, film and all kinds of cool things like that. But for the listeners that maybe didn't catch the episode on Scottish Watches, let's wipe the slate clean and find out a little bit more about yourself and the brand. How did you start a watch company?
I got into watches sort of mid-2000s, so probably, a bit later on than a lot of people. Was never really into sort of Rolexes and things like that because back then you probably go into a shop and buy one, whereas you can't now. And my friend who was a watch collector, he kept saying to me, when are you going to get yourself a, decent timepiece? And I wasn't interested. I was just happy wearing digital watches, very much functional. And I met up with him one day and he was wearing this new watch. And I thought, wow, I like that. That's amazing. That's like, I've not seen something like that before. And it was a Panerai. So I tried it on and I thought, this is like, I'm really into this. I like it a lot. And the funny thing is that you couldn't really, it was very difficult to buy. Panerai sort of mid-2000, they were kind of all the craze. So I kind of said to myself, really want to get one of these because, tried it on. My wife said it looked great. And I thought, yeah, no, this is good. This is good. So first thing I did was obviously go around the shops. Couldn't see any anywhere. I obviously was saving up money, but you could only buy like really expensive gold models, tourbillons or things like that. So that was definitely out of the equation. I just wanted a base hand wound classic Panerai luminol model. And so started going online, as you do, researching, and stumbled across a forum called paneristi.com, which I think was set up around sort of 2000. And there were so many people on there just talking about the brand and the love for the watches and the straps. And I got so into it. I managed to kind of put a want to buy post out, in London, really want to buy a historic model. And someone answered it. A guy who was a collector, he bought lots of watches and had, Rolexes and Panerais. And I think he'd bought one that was the same model as his wife's. And his wife didn't like him having the same model. So he decided to sell it. And it was practically new. It was literally, brand new. And managed to buy it off him for, I think, £1,700, which is an insane amount of money for Panerai. It felt like a lot of money back then, but obviously, looking at it now, it's a very, very affordable thing back then. So started to wear it, started to really get into the whole strap culture behind it, started buying straps, posting on the forum and getting involved with the kind of community of people. And about 6 months after that, kind of got the bug, got the sickness as it was, and thought, I really want a black Panerai. I want one of the PVD models. But back then, they were really quite old and very difficult to get hold of. And I think they were sort of upwards of £10,000. So as a contrast, I thought, really want a black PVD watch, something like the Panerai. And again, stumbled across Bell & Ross, who had that similar kind of design aesthetic. It was obviously a square watch, but it was very similar in kind of look and feel and very simple. So again, sort of saved up money, sold a few old design books and things like that, which were just cluttering around the house, which I'd had for like 20 years. So they're actually worth quite a bit of money, and managed to get like a watch fund together, much to my wife's sort of anger, not anger, but, sort of just, you don't need another watch. Sort of, why do you need two watches?
Why does she need more than one handbag, one pair of shoes?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is it. And I said, well, you only can wear one at a time, aren't you? But no, he's really sort of into that, and went and bought Bell & Ross, and thought that's it. I've got the two watches that I need. They're both kind of similar aesthetic, but they are they're exactly what I need. And it was an event. I went to Jura Watches, met up with a guy called Simon, and he was, and again through Bell & Ross, joining the forum, asking questions, buying straps, sort of meeting people. And I told him what I was doing, and there's a few other guys as well at the event, and said, look, I'm in digital, I've got my own digital agency. And we had this idea to do an alternative Bell & Ross forum, a sort of a fan forum, because there were some issues with the official forum, and that you couldn't really say what you wanted because it was kind of policed by the brand and stuff. So I said, yeah, I can do that. That's quite easy. I can spin that up quite quickly and put a little brand on it. We came up with the brand name Bravo, which is based on, BR and the kind of the French, because they're a French brand. So it's very much kind of in that flavor. Launched the forum, was expecting it to be no more than just the kind of local people that we'd met on the official forum, and some of the people that we'd met at these events. And literally within 2 or 3 months, there was about 15,000 people going on that forum a month. And we were like, this is crazy. Yeah, this is just nuts. There's just so many people coming on there asking questions. A lot of them, obviously, people like I was. You're looking to buy a model. You want to hear from people like you. You don't want to hear from a salesperson. You really want to hear from the people that bought it, or the fans, as it was. Funnily enough, one of the early members of that forum was a guy called James Thompson, who is also known as Black Badger, who obviously went on to do a lot of things in the watch industry. But that was really his first sort of exposure, I think, to sort of watch culture sort of in a social, this was before social media, but in a kind of an online sense. So we did trips to Paris. We did, sort of get-togethers in Paris with the brand. Bell and Ross basically saw what was happening, that we were creating this fan forum basically on their behalf. And they kind of we became not ambassadors, but we became almost like independent consultants for Bell and Ross. Simon went off and actually worked for them for a while officially. I was still running my agency. We then redid their official forum for them. And, it lasted for a good 2 or 3 years, just building up this base and getting people from all over the world to visit. And it was during one of these events, and this was 2009, something like that. My digital agency that I had, and I lived in Henley, someone mentioned to me and said, there's a, have you heard of Bremont? They're a watch brand. They're based down the road. And I was like, I think I've heard of them, but I've not really looked into it, And someone said, you should go and contact them, with all the stuff that you're doing for Bell and Ross. So I thought, I'll send them an email and just see what they say. And obviously fired this email away. I think at the time there was probably 4 people working there, in a converted brewery near the river. And got an email back pretty much straight away saying, yeah, we'd love to meet you. Come over and, sort of see what we've got and everything. And so went over. It's quite good because I could literally walk over from my office, 5 minutes to their office, and kind of struck up a relationship where I would sort of do sort of online photography online, post it online on forums, and again go to their events and just start to kind of build up that, and as well as doing the Bell and Ross thing as well. So it's kind of not working directly, but kind of working as a hobby almost for 2, one quite established brand and one up and coming brand.
Any watch brand that begins with BR, pretty much.
Yeah, that was the thing. And obviously Bell and Ross got twig of it, and they weren't happy because they do pilot watches and Bremont were doing pilot watches, and they were at Baselworld, and so when you go to Baselworld, it's like, who do you go to? So we would go to Bremont, who were not in the main bit. We'd go to the hotel where they are, and then we'd sneak off to the Bell and Ross camp. They were the guys that basically paid for us to go over there. So it was a little bit like that. But I kind of finished when Simon got a job with Bell and Ross. I kind of said, right, I'm going to finish. You carry on with that, and I'm gonna start working more closely with Bremont, partly because they were down the road. I was getting much better access. I was able to just go in and see their military watches that they'd just suddenly built. I could take them away, take them home, photograph them the same day or night, or in some cases 4 a.m. in the morning, and then ship them back the next day. They'd drop them off at lunchtime, and by sort of the evening, they'd have a set of photos that they could share online, which is, it kind of worked both ways because I was getting to see new watches. I was getting to see them close up. I was getting to see how things were not built, but, getting a lot of kind of exposure to it. And I was really enjoying it because it was a complete contrast to what I was doing, which was effectively sort of co-running a digital agency. I then went on to do a forum for Bremont called Altitude, which is still going to this day. I also set up their Bremont fans Facebook page, which I think is more popular now than the forum. And it was during, I think, 2012 that someone from the forum said, look, you should do a forum special edition. And I was like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but it's not really down to me. It's down to, it's down to the guys of what they want to do. And I think someone from the forum got in touch with them and they said, yeah, we'll do it. And so what I did is I kind of worked with their designer, had an idea of what we wanted to do. He designed some of the watches up, and kind of we were saying, yeah, we want it to be, anthracite dial, pro dial, based on the Martin Baker model, DLC or steel. And they rendered some pictures out, and then I posted them up online. So what I was doing is effectively, I was almost retailing the watch for them. So they would obviously take all the money. but I was just almost promoting it in retail, sort of raising awareness of this watch. And when they came to take the deposits on the date, the watch, I think, practically sold out in 24 hours. And I got such a buzz engaging with people from a sales point of view, wanting to buy a watch, what strap they wanted, what options. It was, again, a total contrast to what I was doing in my sort of day-to-day job, which was designing, film websites. And I thought to myself, I really want to do this myself. I'm a designer. I can, I had ideas about what watches I would want to design when I got to, and so early 2013, I kind of made a decision that I was going to start making watches and start designing watches. That's how it started.
Gosh, and then you've put yourself under a bit of pressure for Salon QP, didn't you?
I did.
What happened then?
I did. As a designer, you kind of get used to deadlines, and you sometimes know as well that unless you've got a deadline, you don't really kind of make an effort to get stuff done. Like a lot of things, you say, oh yeah, it was like me going, oh yeah, I'll get the company's website redone, and you don't have a deadline, so you never get on with it. And so I thought with the watches thing, I was quite serious about it. I also thought if I go down this road, there's no turning back. I'm probably going to not be able to work with these brands again because I'm going to have my own brand. And so the first thing I did, and I got my wife to do, was book a stand at Salon QP under a kind of not even having a brand name or anything. And this was, I think, March or something. Booked the stand, paid the deposit, and then I knew that I had to have watches ready for November. So it was, that's kind of setting a deadline. Not only watches, but a brand. Everything that goes around it. And that was quite stressful.
Well, if you are to do a limited edition for British Watchmakers Day, you've got 8 months now.
We've got 8 months, yeah.
Is that exciting? Is that deadline for you exciting?
Exactly.
So what was the first watch?
I did a collection, and again, it kind of very much borrowed from that inspiration from Panerai, Bell & Ross, simple 3-hander called Axis. Axis being that it's sort of like the starting point, the horizon for the collection. That's what I wanted to do. And it was 3 watches. It was one single watch, but it was in 3 color. It was in 3 variants. We had stainless steel with black dial. We had a DLC version. That's harking back to kind of Bell & Ross style, that kind of, wanting to do a black cased watch. And then I really wanted to do a bronze watch. Back then, 2012, 2013, there was very, very few brands doing bronze watches. And certainly no one in Britain was doing. And so I wanted to definitely do one. And that's what I went in with. And we were, Pinion was the first company to make a sort of British-built bronze watch that was launched in...
Well, before you tell us a little bit more about that, why don't you tell us where the name Pinion came from?
Yeah, I think I'd never wanted to... Again, it's the name element. I mean, a lot of people put their own name on it, like Christopher Ward, for example. I didn't want to put my name on it. I didn't want to call it Berry Watches. I didn't think it sounded all Piers or something like that. And I was looking around for terms. I spent Easter, so about a month after booking Salon QP, I spent the whole of Easter coming up with the brand name, logo, and initial designs for the first watch. And I stumbled across some watchmaking terms, and I came across this word called Pinion. And I thought, well, that's quite nice because it's short. The characters are kind of similar to my name in terms of the first 2 letters. So there's kind of relevance there, but it's not my name. And I just like the fact that the pinion wheels are, instrumental in effectively how your hands and other elements of the mechanical watch operate, but they're often hidden. You don't see them. So I quite like that aspect of it. So that's what I went for. And I obviously did a check on trademarks and things, and it was free. So I thought, no, I'm gonna go with that.
Fair enough. That's that explained. Back onto the bronze.
Yeah. So again, between March and November, I basically resigned from my own company. So I set up an agency in 2003 with a couple of brothers. We grew the business. We worked doing a lot of work with Universal Pictures on most of their film releases. Worked on about 40 or so films.
Hit us with some names. Give us the big highlights.
The big highlights. Well, we did the second Bridget Jones film, which is quite a big film, but
I love it.
We did Atonement, which is a good one.
Yeah.
We did what else we did? We did Frost Nixon. Then we did some more, which were more from Universal areas. So we started looking at Despicable Me 2. We did Kick-Ass 2, but I think we then started working with Fox. I can't remember if they were all, but we ended up doing like The Hobbit, and a lot of those were mobile apps that you would engage with and do something with. So yeah, some quite big stuff.
That's some heavy hitters there.
We did some kind of lower, sort of what you call it, sort of more arty, low budget films they'd often release in between the blockbusters because they know they wouldn't get any traction. So we do quite a lot of those as well.
And then, of course, when you launched Pinion, then you got the watches on a few famous wrists as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Obviously, we've done quite a bit of stuff in film and TV. And that came about as a bit of an accident, I think. The first one we did was for a TV show called McMafia, which had James Norton in it, and made a watch for James Norton, but it was too big for his suit. The bad guy, the Russian bad guy in it, mafia boss, he had one, so he wore that for that production. And then the next one, I'm trying to think what else we did. The big one was obviously Hugh Grant in The Gentleman. And again, we were originally meant to make a watch for Matthew McConaughey, but for some reason, and it may be because contractually he wants to wear, a brand that he was associated with, I don't know. Sometimes it's costume designers, they have a specific look that they want to achieve. But they said, oh no, that's not going to work. But we've got another character that will be perfect for a bronze watch. And I said, oh, great. And then they went, oh, yeah, it's Hugh Grant. I was like, okay. And he turned out to be probably the best character in the film, sort of
totally.
the whole of the film. You don't, and again, with this whole kind of films, it's a bit potluck because it's not product placement as such. So you're not paying money, you're not getting airtime with your logo on the screen, or people mentioning the watch, for example. If you're lucky, you will possibly someone be on a mobile phone, and they'll have their hand up, and you'll see the watch, or there'll be a scene where they're putting something on, or the watch is on the side. And so, like with The Gentleman, you very rarely see the watch, and that's partly because it was filmed in February. And so Hugh Grant was wearing this great big coat throughout most of the film. But yeah, no, we did that, and then the kind of bigger one was Fast and Furious 9. Which we did. We made a bespoke strap for John Cena, massive long strap because he's a big guy and his wrists are probably 10 inches or something, just huge.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like lizard skin as well because it needed to match his pointy shoes that he was wearing.
I was just thinking, Hugh Grant's recent role as an Oompa Loompa. I mean, that would definitely been too big for the suit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what's really nice, and obviously, if you go back, Hugh Grant's, he's traditionally a real watch person. He actually wore Panerai in the original Bridget Jones films. And this is before I was kind of into watches. And so knowing that he was a bit of a Panerai guy, and I used to be as well, kind of thought, this is... And I got a note back from one of his assistants saying, thanks for loaning the watch. He really, really liked it. And that means a lot to me, that knowing that he's a watch guy and he liked the watch, that's good. Sometimes they get letters back saying, can we keep it? And I'm like, no. So you get that as well, but not on that occasion.
So that's the big screen. How about the smaller screens?
We've done Doctor Who. We did Chris North, who's a guest. He's playing like a Donald Trump type character. We've done Taken TV series with Clive, who's a friend of mine. He's worn the watches in a few things, but Taken, I did the whole of most of the cast in season 1 of Taken. I think there was 2 seasons of that. We did Angela Black, which was out a couple of years ago, and I think now on Netflix. I've had a few near misses as well. So I'm just trying to think. So I've had a few people that have kind of like, oh, can we get one of your watches? And then it transpires that the costume guy wants a bracelet or it's got an eye, so sometimes you miss out. And I think one of those was Citadel, which was out last year, which was that kind of sci-fi film where we sent a bronze watch off and it didn't go with them. So, sometimes you miss out, but yeah, we've got that. And the morning show, we've just done I think it's season 3 of the morning show. So there'll be a watch there, but nothing, there hasn't been much over the past year. So it's very sort of wait for the call and see what you can supply or come up with and go from there.
Just so happens, I have a friend in the industry, another guest on Scottish Watches who I may be able to put you in touch with, and he may be able to connect some people together because he's always working on new things, and he's recently had a new series out in the BBC. So leave that one with me and let's go back in time to Salon QP. How did it all go? Did you meet your deadline?
Yeah, I did. Just I think it wasn't until the weekend before that I actually had any watches. So I was very much like, this is not happening, and it was for a few weeks. It was very stressful. Straight away, I'd said I wanted a bronze watch, and the case maker was saying, "Great, yeah, but we can't make one for then." And and I'd not released anything, so I'd never said that I was going to release one. So I had no pressure. I just had it in my head that I just wanted to make a statement or a novelty, something that was slightly different. Because again, back then, no one was doing bronze watches. So I went off and got one of the steel cases and used the platers who did the Olympic flame for the 2012 Olympics to basically to plate it in a bronze color to then put it on the stand. So when I actually presented the watches, it was still a steel watch, but it was a bronze plated watch. So, but that's kind of sometimes the things that you have to go through, I think, to create those prototypes and those demo models. And both with sort of Bremont and Bell and Ross, I've been at their stands, and both brands have gone, don't kind of touch that, or don't try and wind that, because they're just prototypes that they've mocked up for the show, So it's very much about getting that right, concept across and selling it. And obviously, when I went into production, they were proper bronze cases, but yeah, that's the only way I could do it. So it was a success. It was good. I literally turned up the salon. We had the smallest stand. I turned up with a small bag with my watches and a few straps, put them all out, and it was good. On looking back, I think if I was going to do it again, I'd have spent a bit longer and a bit more time to kind of think it out. But I think you've got to start somewhere, and it's better to start small and go bigger than come out with a big splash and then suddenly disappear after 18 months.
How did you find the whole process of creating a brand from scratch?
The brand element was quite straightforward. Again, sort of design is in my background, and I think the main problem that you have is because you're doing it for yourself, you've got to be quite critical. So you've got to really sort of design something and then come back to it. So you have to, certainly when I'm designing a watch, I'll come up with a draft design, then I'll leave it a few days and I'll come back to it, because then you see it with a fresh eyes as it was. So the brand was fairly straightforward. And again, it wasn't meant to be a big brand. I didn't want to have a big strap line and a big load of branding. It was meant to be all about the watches. For me, the brand was secondary to the actual watches themselves.
Well, I think what you said there, I've heard somebody else say something similar. I don't know if it was Stephen King, where it was an author, and they said they do their first draft and they put it in a drawer and they'll leave it for a while, then they come back to it. And I suppose it's like if you've got a report or an essay at school, college, university, or whatever, as soon as you write it and then you look at it, you spot no mistakes. Everything makes complete sense. It's only when you come back to it later on that you see the tiny little flaws and the areas that you can make amends.
It is. And it's the same with any design, really. I mean, certainly knowing from doing not just watch designs, but other stuff, you're kind of working almost like in a tunnel vision where you're focused on getting something done. And you're so focused on the particular style or the approach that you sometimes just need to, sometimes when you take a step back, you come back the next morning and you go, I think I'm going to change all that because that isn't right. And that's very much what it's, so doing the watch design element is very much, small iterations, testing them, printing them out and, mocking them up and stuff like that. And getting to the point where you think, I think this is going to work. I mean, obviously as a designer, you're always picking salt in your work. It doesn't matter what you do. You're always going to come back and go, you know what, if I was going to do that again, I would have changed the color, or I would have changed the layout or whatever. But I guess that's just the nature of being a designer.
I think with a lot of creative people, sometimes they just have to leave it alone and just, it's sometimes quite difficult. You just keep changing things and changing. How long does your watch design take generally?
I would say on average, I won't count on hours, but I think certainly sort of over 2 to 3 weeks, I'll get something to a point where it's kind of ready to go into production. Because obviously I do the initial sketching, then I'll do the CAD work, which is more from a visualization point of view rather than a technical drawing point of view. But I'll do rudimentary technical drawings as well. So normally, like, the heights of watches and things like the heights of the hands and the dials, because everything has to clear. What people don't see is everyone looks at a watch face and they see it sort of straight down. They see the hands. But actually what's really important is, all those things coming up from the dial, like the applied indexes or the ring, the sloping ring around the edge of the dial. The hands need to clear. They need to be, it needs to all kind of fit together, because ultimately you're making something that needs to work and not drop apart. So there's a lot of that kind of aspect to it as well. But in terms of the visual stuff, come up with an initial visual, sketch out, do the dial, do the case, rudimentary case design, then mock it up in 3D. And that's when I get a better sense of it in terms of where I'm coming from it. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll speak to some suppliers, get some estimates in, then I'll draft up all the required artwork. So basically it's like handing off to suppliers. So I'll do, case dimensions and drawings, which aren't that detailed and technical, but they give you those kind of rudimentary elements that you want to have. And again, mostly with the dial, it's pretty much, straight transfer to them, and then they just basically put it together in their systems to mark it up, whether it's applied indexes to engineer or it's printing.
That's some of the positives, but we'd like to hear some of the negatives. Tell us some of the horror stories of the last decade plus since you've been designing watches. What have been the gotcha moments where maybe you thought things were plain sailing, you sent it away and it didn't quite go according to plan? What can we learn from with your mistakes?
I've had a few things. I had one of my earliest watches, which was based on the R1969, which was based on using the New Old Stock value movements. And I wanted a kind of center raised element to the dial. Basically, what I actually probably wanted was just a dial that had a contrasting press in it or something like that. That's really what I wanted. But I had this thing in my head that it had to be raised. And so the dial maker applied the raised area to the dial, which meant that the hands wouldn't fit because the dial was too high. And this is what I was talking about earlier about, it's all about the heights. It's all about the clearance. And if you do something and you get a load of dials made and then you suddenly can't, I get a phone call from a watchmaker going, we've got a problem. And I'm like, I don't like those calls, because it's either a problem that you can fix or it's a problem that you can't fix. And in that case, because we were using a New Old Stock movement, it had to go off and engineer a load of hour wheels and kind of pinions for it, specifically for that height, rather than having to redo the dials. So there's that, and then there's the other ones where just made a stupid mistake, like 1 millimeter out on a dial measurement, and then suddenly you get these dials back and they're wrong, and yet all your other dials have been 34 mil, and I think I put 33 mil in or something like that. And the dial makers don't once think to say to you, here are the dials you made, the 34. Well, this one's 33, and you suddenly get a load of stuff that you spent thousands on, and you can't do anything with them. So but you live in, the thing is you learn from your mistakes, and certainly for me, the whole heights of hands, clearance of hands is absolutely critical, but also fine tuning and checking to make sure that if you have just put in the wrong digit on a diagram that you check through it, because it can cost you thousands. The only option is you have to go and get them all done again, and then you have to wait another 3 to 6 months to get them made again. It's just a nightmare sometimes.
I do hope everything went well with the latest watch, Neutron.
Yeah, I mean, recently it's all been pretty straightforward. I think it's because now I've got a formula that I stick to. I think certainly, sort of starting out, potentially the first 5 years, I was learning as I was doing it. And like you say, you learn from mistakes, and some of the mistakes can be costly. But now I've got a formula where I kind of know what will work. Then it's just about creating the aesthetic look that you want to achieve. But also with like the Neutron, I invested in a sort of fairly biggish industrial grade engraving machine, which enabled me to actually start doing like bespoke custom backs for people. It also meant that when I did a set of cases, I wouldn't have to get them engraved at source. And then if I decided I want to change the line, I'd have a load of case backs, because I ended up collecting a few case backs and things which had not been used or been used for something else. And so doing the blank case backs means I'm in full control of that now. And again, spent the best part of the last 18 months perfecting the engraving, where I can go really deep on the engraving, get it as black as you want, texture perfect, smooth. And, again, that takes quite a bit to do. That isn't easy, but suddenly you're able to just start to, create stuff. And so I've done a glass back recently where someone wanted their initials put on it, so I engraved on that, and it goes on the inside. So you've got this exhibition back, but you've got this very subtle, it's almost like sandblasting effect on the back. But also you've got people that want to give a watch to someone that's just retired from their work, and you put their work logo on and a thank you message and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good. It's that personalization element kind of really makes the watch for some people.
So this new one, do you want to tell us what's so special about it compared to your other releases? What makes it stand out?
The Neutron I released last year, and I do have a new one in kind of development, which I'm hoping, I will get it done for the show next year. That's my deadline. But I'm hoping to get.
I don't want to catch you in the case when I don't edit these shows in time.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the Neutron, I think with that, I obviously wants to go a bit smaller, so sort of 38 mil in size, a bit slimmer. Still wants to use ETA movement. I'm really happy with the quality of those. They're great. So really wants to kind of stick with that. And no date is always good. And I've extended now to start doing, no date watches, because I tend to find with dates, you kind of compromise the design a little bit, or you put the date in an angled view, which I'm actually fine with. But a lot of people just go, I'd buy that if it didn't have a date. The funny thing is when I do a watch without a date, no one comes and says, I'd buy that if it did have a date. So there's something interesting there. I did all the sort of very nice finished dials, and then all the numerals were all applied. But then I did a polishing effect on them, which made them look like car. Like you get on cars, you get a numeral on a car, and it's like there's a slight curvature to it. So it's just got a very slight sort of, just gives it that extra depth. It's not something I've seen before on watches. And I think doing that on the Neutron really kind of gave it a really nice quality. So that's my last watch, but it's certainly not my last that I've been working on this year, because now I tend to do a lot more special projects and things like that. So I tend to be doing like watches on commission, as it was, which aren't retailed online. They are for sort of military or for other collectors and things like that.
Some military ones that we can't talk about.
Yeah, how would somebody that maybe wouldn't want their name known get in touch with you, and what's the process of creating a custom watch for their squadron?
What they tend to do is, I think I often get referrals from people in the watch industry, because you get some people who make bespoke watches and they're quite expensive. And of course, these guys will go there and say, we want to do a squadron watch, we want to do 50 pieces, we want to retail it for £1,000 each or around that figure. And of course, these guys can't do that. But they do say, but we know a person who can. And what I've done now, I'm on to my kind of third succession. So first one was Special Forces, which was back in sort of between 2020 and 2021. I did around 80 watches for them. It's for a division of the Special Forces. I'm not allowed to show the watch. Although I think when we do the show, I'll probably show the back of it, because I think that will probably be, something that I can maybe share, but not the front, because it would effectively give away someone's identity. And just bear in mind that their previous watchmaker was Rolex as well. So, that's something to kind of think, right, okay.
Another good British brand there, yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So did that. Then I did a small project with Mercedes-Benz Club, which was more of an owners sort of club, which was quite a nice little celebration watch. And then this year I'm doing a squadron watch for the 617 Dam Busters Squadron. So again, up to 80 watches. The watch is completely bespoke to them. So what I don't do is I don't take a commercial model and stick a badge on it. It is a complete bespoke dial. They've got their own lightning bolt hand on the watch that's part of their insignia. They have a, as I say, completely bespoke dial. The packaging is completely bespoke to them. The strap, the back, everything. And that's, that's with an ETA, 42 mil stainless steel, and that's retailing to them for around £1,000 a piece. So, it's a good. I think if you see it at the show, because I will bring it to the show. I think you'll be quite surprised at what a bespoke watch can look like that's totally tailored. The only element of Pinion on that watch is a small signature in the bottom of the where the seconds are. So it's all their own brand, and that's how I like to prefer to do those sorts of watches.
Okay, well, maybe we should talk a little bit more about the show, and maybe you can tell us about the location, where it's going to be held, and why you chose that location.
Yeah, well, before we booked something, I have spoken to a lot of British brands, and I just we all just want to make it right for the brands. It's not for the alliance, it's for the brands, and we're making it quite affordable. I'd like to believe that, so everyone can take part if they wish. And a lot of people said, wouldn't it be great to get lots and lots of light and get the big venue so we can fit lots of people. So the one we've chosen is in Westminster, and it's called Lindley Hall. It's got a huge glass roof, so you could, see your watches very clearly. And when it gets a bit darker in March, then there's plenty of enormous lamps around and on the stands. So, and it can fit in, I think, about 700 people standing. So we'd love to get lots of collectors in. Our club members go for free as usual, and then everyone else, it's just a nominal amount, but you'll have to get your tickets on Eventbrite. And tickets are going on sale in the beginning of October.
Fantastic. Well, looking forward to seeing how many of those 81 brands eventually turn up. But before we finish off the show, I believe you have some quick-fire questions for Piers, don't you?
Of all the watches we've discussed, which one makes you the most proud, Piers?
I think it's got to be the Axis, just because it was my first watch that I made. It goes back to a time when I did it under a lot of duress. And I think certainly the Axis Bronze is one of my favorites. Whilst it's not the most refined and probably not the most design, considered watch that I've now evolved to in, more recent collections, it's certainly one that I really like.
Apart from Pinion, what's your other favorite British brand right now?
Oh, interesting. I do, because I'm really into my military watches. I do have a soft spot for Vertex, Don's brand. I really like what they're doing with their aesthetic and just the fact that they're just so cool. So yeah, I think again, if I didn't have Pinion, I'd have probably bought one. I think that's certainly, it's really, they're really, really nice.
Vertex will be at the event as well.
It's very interesting that you say that, because when I think of Vertex, I think of Pinion, and when I think of Pinion, I think of Vertex.
That's interesting. Yeah. No, it's just I say I take a lot of my references from military tools, sort of, very kind of clean watches, and when they were released, they were kind of like, yeah, that's absolutely bang on. And and some of the subsequent stuff that they've done is spot on. So yeah, it's definitely one. And I just, the whole brand is great. The history behind it and everything with the obviously the Dirty Dozen connection and stuff. It's gold. I don't have any heritage. I just have 10 years of kind of, making some watches and selling some watches, and but I mean, all brands are 10 at one point. That's the thing to remember, is that all brands have been young and maybe not been a really high profile brand at some point.
I'll take the second quickfire question, and that is, who are your favourite international watchmakers?
I've got a soft spot for Panerai, but I must say I'm not so keen on their new models. I still think that some of their older collections are better. And again, it's from the aesthetic point of view. Who else? I don't tend to like sort of bigger brands. I really like Habring as well. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I think it is. But some of the stuff they do is very unique. And I remember speaking to one of the selling QPs. I think it was before I was exhibiting, just going along as a fan. And I remember speaking to him, and he was like, yeah, keep it simple, keep it stupid. And he just had this like running seconds hand on the watch, which was going like twice the speed and stuff. And I just thought, yeah, that's great. Love it.
All right, well, we have come to the end of our time with you, Piers, so we're going to have to let you go and keep designing some new creations. But before you go, do you want to tell listeners how they can get in touch with you, how they can find out about what you're up to, they can look at your previous watches and stay in touch to find out about your new ones?
Yeah, they can visit pinionwatches.com. All the information's on the site, and you can get in touch with me directly through the site as well, if you want to talk about the models that we've done in the past or present. And look forward to seeing people at the show next March.
Well, thank you, Piers, for joining us on the show. Can't wait to meet up with you again, because I think I've only met you once, and that was in 2019 at a very small private function, which was the Watch It Fair run by Watch It All About, if you remember that one. And we spoke briefly. You showed me, I think it was actually one of the watches from the Fast and Furious movie, the one that ended up in John Cena's wrist, and that's how we became pals. You've obviously been on Scottish Watches, and yeah, just looking forward to catching up again, because the COVID years, they were right in the middle, and it took out a lot of travel, it took out a lot of the opportunities for people to actually come and see watches in real life. Thankfully that seems to be a distant memory, touch wood, and yeah, roll on next March.
Thank you.